Hello, everyone. My name is Guillermo Subauste, and I'm a musician, producer, and engineer. Currently broadcasting from my house, where I've had to move most of my studio. And I've been working since the social isolation rules came into place. I started Stream TuneUp, which is a company that provides one-on-one consultations with musicians or artists or just entertainers in general. Some of them are like doctors and physiotherapists as well, because now everyone's having to work from home. So I offer one-on-one consultations with people where, over Zoom or Google Chromecast, not Chromecast, sorry, but Google Remote Desktop Control. I'm able to control their computer remotely, or if they're not comfortable with that, to just for them to share their screen. And then I sort of walk you through the process of what's needed for your gear to work the best way it can for your live streams, basically. So some of the questions are the same. I find that a lot of people have similar gear, and depending on what they can get, because most of these things are pretty sold out everywhere. But yeah, depending on what they want to do or how much they want to spend, there's different options as to what you can do or what you can get to make your streams better. In this case, I'm using what I would consider to be the most complex system that you can do, but I'm going to walk you a little bit through what you can do, for example, if all you have is your phone. So if we go here to the next scene, this whole configuration you can do live as well using a program called OBS. There's a million tutorials online on how to make it so that you can do this picture-in-picture and change between scenes. And if you have multiple cameras, you can also run them all from here. I love it. It's free, so get it and start learning it because it has a lot of really cool stuff. So going back to this, this is just a phone, right? You have your phone and you're streaming from there. You can stream from it to Instagram. You can do Facebook. You can do Zoom. Some of the problems that you're going to have with iPhones, however, is that some of the audio settings that allow the audio to be better are not really accessible from the phone. You're going to find that some of those menus, for example, for Zoom, you're going to be able to find them a lot faster and know exactly what to do with them, as I might explain later on. But to make sure that, for example, when I'm singing really quietly or the guitar goes really quiet as well, there's no gate applied. This is basically a function so that if I were just talking and then there's a lot of background noise, when I'm not talking, then that volume is brought down. However, as musicians, we don't want that to happen. That might cause some choppy sound. So we need to disable all those functions. However, on the phone, most of the time, you're not going to be able to do that. So then the audio part becomes a matter of using the built-in microphone. In a lot of iPhones and even Androids, the built-in microphones are great and they might work as they are. I would recommend in that case to do multiple tests, basically, just to make sure that, for example, if you're singing and playing guitar at the same time, to make sure that the guitar is not louder than your vocal, or that your vocal is a lot louder than the guitar as well. And then, for example, if you're using an amp, then that means that we might have to bring the amp down to make your vocal louder. Or if, let's say, you're singing with someone in your family and that person has a louder voice, then you're going to have to be mixing with air, meaning that you're going to have to make that friend go a bit farther, right? Anything that's farther from the microphone is going to sound more roomy, but it's also going to sound less loud. So you can create your mix with where you put people. Like if you have a drummer and the drummer is super, super loud, you can put them behind plexiglass. Or, if you have a snare, for example, and you have someone playing a snare, you can do things like put a wallet on top of the snare to deaden the sound a little bit, or even a t-shirt over it. Sure, it changes the sound, but we're all doing what we can from our houses, right? And if you don't have multiple microphones, this sometimes ends up being the only way you can do it. There are things you can do, however, when it comes to the lighting, right? And cameras in general, and this goes for phones or fancier cameras that you can connect to your computer, are devices that love light. The more light there is, the better the image will look. So anytime you're in a low light scenario, you might find that that there's a lot of noise. This ISO noise is basically, it kind of looks almost pixelated, and it's going to get laggy as well. Like the image is going to get a bit stuck in places. The lenses or the light receptors or whatever they're called in cameras don't really work that well with low light. So make sure to have lights that work. So if at home you have some lamps, for example, or some more lamps or whatever source of light, even a window, for example, can work. Then getting the camera or your setup close to that might be the way to go. I'm not a photographer. I'm not a videographer, though lately I've been doing a lot of video editing, but I've been able to learn a little bit from lighting, and I would say for the most part, try to have a source at the front, right? So right now I have a couple of lights going. There's those Christmas lights in the background, which right now are blurred, but that's because of what lenses I'm using. I'll show you that later on. But at the front, I have another light source. It's pretty bright, so I've put some parchment paper on top of it just to soften it a little bit. And then on the side, I have another light here that if I cover, you can sort of see. I'm covering it just with my hand, and you can see that it's sort of getting rid of some of the extra shadows that you can get. This is the part where you can get creative, and I recommend people to just test what works best. Some of the lights that you can get, however, if you have no lamps at home and no windows, right now I'm in a basement, for example, are some of these. This is from Amazon. You can go to your local dealer or any store that sells Best Buy or Future Shop. I think it doesn't exist anymore, but Amazon is also an option. There's a few different lights here, and they're pretty cheap. As you can see, most of them are LEDs, which means that they don't really generate any heat. Your room is not going to get hotter from having more lights necessarily, like back in the day. And you're going to be able to have, for example, one of these lights going to the front and then have another one from behind, and then just make it look a bit nicer with that. That obviously is if you only have your phone and you're streaming from that, then yeah, the lighting is going to help a lot. Where you put people, where the sound is coming from as well. And also, I guess it would be the internet connection. And this goes for everything. If you're not using Wi-Fi and you're using your phone, you have to make sure that you're in a location that has a lot of bars in the LTE or 4G or 5G or whatever you're using to make sure that the connection is stable. Also, this is going to be the same case if you're using your computer or other devices. Now, if you have a phone and you also have an interface or an external microphone that you can connect to the phone itself, then you would be looking at something like this, for example. The picture up there is of a Focusrite 2i2, which in my experience, having talked to over 50 people in the last couple of weeks, you'll find that you can connect to the phone. There's a few adapters you're going to need, obviously. The output of the Focusrite is USB, so that means that you need lighting, which would be the connection on the phone. If you're using an iPhone or the mini USB or micro USB, and then that way you can connect it to the Focusrite and use that basically as an external microphone. There are dedicated external microphones that you can connect to the phone, and all of these are going to give you a bit more control as to how you're sounding and maybe where you put the microphones. Because one of the problems of streaming from your phone is that the camera is at the same place as where the microphone is, right? So if you want a longer shot, then you're putting the microphone farther by default. Other options I've seen with people, for example, let's go to the next. Right, this is another option that works really well. In this case, we're using the iRig Stream, which is an interface that's created specifically for the phone itself. You connect the output of this iRig stream into the phone, and then on the input, you would be connecting the output of your computer, for example. I'll explain all this a bit more in detail in a second. Let's say that you have a microphone there. We have a, what is this? This is a FET 47. It's a Neumann FET 47. Great microphone. Probably a bit on the expensive side. You don't need to buy expensive microphones necessarily to sound great. I'm going to show you a couple of tricks on how to make not so great microphones sound a bit better. But in this case, basically what I would have done is connect the microphone to the interface, right? Which in this case could be the iRig stream if it has an XLR input. I'm not sure at the moment, but if it doesn't, you will connect the microphone to the Focusrite to your computer, right? And then out of the headphone output of the Focusrite, you could connect that directly into the phone, either using a light into like jack input, basically, with a little adapter, or else you would go into the iRig stream, which it does have 2-line inputs at the bottom. Now, the next option is, well, I have my phone, but I'm using it for something else, or the camera on it is not great, and I want to use my computer. So the computer has a built-in webcam, at least most of them do. I find the quality on laptops to be not as great as what you can get from phones, for example. There are ways to make your phone work like a webcam, whether on Android or Apple as well. It gets very specific depending on what phone you have, but for iPhone, there's OBS camera is one of them. Epoch Cam is another one that basically, some of them are paid. You have to pay usually about $20 to $30. And what this does is allow you to use your phone as a webcam. So you can use the camera of the phone and you would connect that to your computer via USB. And then in your computer, you have to install whatever, if it's Epoch or if it's OBS camera, you have to install the computer part of this application. And then that's how they're able to connect. And if you're in Zoom or Facebook or not Instagram, but YouTube, then under camera source, you would select the phone instead of the webcam, which in Apple's is usually, it shows up as FaceTime camera, I believe. Or basically you can connect it that way, or you can use the built-in camera, but I like the phones a bit better. However, as for the sound, the built-in microphones on laptops are definitely not great. Also, another thing that happens with them is that they're going to be picking up a lot of the noise that the computer is making. So when you're streaming, the processor of the computer is working really hard, and most of the time they're going to kick into like a high-speed fan mode, and that just causes more interference in the sound and whatnot. So it's usually better to use external microphones when you're working in your computer as well. And for that, we don't necessarily need to use expensive microphones either. Like there are microphones that go up to like $20,000 or $25,000. The SM7 is, for example, another one that a lot of people recommend. The SM7 is a microphone it's really famous in the audio world. Like Michael Jackson recorded in it. James Hetfield from Metallica is also seen in the documentary Some Kind of Monster singing in it as well. A lot of DJs, you find it in radios a lot too. I'm not a fan. I think they're a bit honky, personally. And also is the problem that they are a microphone that is good only in a few things. So you can use that microphone for voices, some of them. You can use it on snares, you can use it on guitars, but it's almost like $400 or $500, which seems really expensive for a microphone that only has a few uses. At that point, if you're going to be spending that much money, I would say maybe getting something like, if you want to go to the cheap side of things, maybe an AT, like Audio-Technica 2020, or if you have more money, a 4040. Aston, which is a brand from the UK that makes these really cool microphones like the Spirit or the Origin. Both of those, I think, are around $500. The cool thing about them, however, is that they're condenser microphones, just like the AT2020s or 4040s, which means they're a bit more sensitive. The transducing of energy, without getting too technical, happens differently than with an SM7. This is two plates that are being charged by phantom power and blah blah blah. Basically, they're going to be a bit more versatile because they're going to sound good in voice, but you can also use them on an acoustic guitar, for example. You can use them as overheads. You can use them as a banjo microphone or for pianos if you end up getting two, which the SM7 you can definitely use for those things, but the sound is not going to be exactly the same. Like I said, from my perspective at least, it kind of gets a bit honky. So in this picture, I have I think it's a Yeti or Yeti Blue. It's a USB microphone. I'm not sure exactly how much it costs, but I want to say it's definitely under $200. Now, the cool thing about this kind of microphone is that it's both a microphone and also an interface. An interface is a device that you use to convert analog audio, right? What's happening here in real life. And then it goes to the microphone, and then the interface is the device that converts that analog signal, which is just voltage, into bits and bytes, basically, into ones and zeros, which is information that the computer can actually read. Now, the interface also converts the audio from digital, which is inside of the computer, to analog, so that it comes back into our ears, right? What we're having here on the headphones is analog audio. It's coming from a digital source, but it was converted, and it was converted by using the interface. The advantage of using these USB microphones, and you know they're USB microphones because they don't have an XLR output, which is the output with three little things, prongs, that goes into an interface. But in this case, the output of the microphone is just a USB cable. And that cable goes connected to the computer and is kind of a combo of a microphone and also an interface. So the conversion from analog to digital is happening on the microphone itself. Then it travels through the USB cable to your computer, and then it goes out of your computer into the headphone output of the microphone. This is the reason why these microphones have headphone outputs, which is not something that you normally see on other microphones that you use for a studio, for example. It's supposed to be a one microphone solution. If you want to have two microphones, for example, I wouldn't really recommend getting one of these because you would be using two different interfaces, which the computer gets confused if it sees that. So the way to do more microphones would be to get an interface. However, let's go back a little bit. Let's imagine that you end up getting one of these microphones. The advantage of these microphones, again, is that you can put the source, which is you, a bit closer to the microphone, for example, and then having the image a bit farther. Also, it allows you to, again, play with the distance. Maybe you're playing the piano as well. Then you can set the microphone in the best place for the piano and your voice to be captured properly. The other advantage this has, and this is what I end up using most of the time, is that you can actually send this microphone to a DAW. A DAW is a digital audio workstation that can be Ableton or Logic, Pro Tools, Reaper, you name it. There's a million out there, Studio One. Some of them have advantages over others, but for what you're doing, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to feel frustrated because you can't get Pro Tools right now, or because Logic is, $600 or however much it is. You can get Reaper. It's pretty cheap. If you're a student, I think they charge you $60 for the license. If you make more than 30 grand a year making music, then I think it's $200 for the license. And the trial period is unlimited. After 60 days, I believe it just says, please buy me, and then it counts 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it lets you keep using it forever. However, as most people I know that use Reaper, they end up buying it later on because it is a great program, and it's awesome that it's open source, and people can contribute to it, and it has a great community. So check it out. Now, you might be asking why we're using a DAW. The reason why is so that we can apply EQ and compression and maybe some reverb or whatever effects we want to add to the microphone. We're seeing a lot of streams come out where, the audio is kind of the same, the image is kind of the same, things sound kind of not even close to how they used to sound back in the day, or at a live show, or even from studio quality. And yes, it is the situation we're in, but this is a simple, very simple solution that would allow you to just, embellish the sound a bit more going through the DAW. I'll show you that in 1 second, because the next slide is as to what we would do if we want to use two sources, right? Maybe you are using the USB microphone and it works out great, but you're finding that maybe your acoustic guitar is not being picked that well. So the next step would be perhaps to use a microphone for your voice and a microphone for your guitar, or maybe your guitar connected directly into the interface. So we're going to go back to the Focusrite 2x2, which has two inputs, as you can see. I'm not sure if I can use the mouse here, but yeah, right above the guitar where the name says Scarlett, right on the interface, that's one input, and then where the red knob is to the right is the other one. So you would connect your guitar. I normally would put the voice first, so you would connect your voice to channel 1 and your guitar to channel 2. You can control the gain of each of those. That's just how sensitive the input is. If you hear your voice is starting to go into the red in the meter in whatever DAW you're using, you'll find that you have to bring that gain down. You basically should not be clipping, but you also don't want the signal too low that you can't hear it, right? Usually if you keep it around like -15, -18, this is in the meter in your DAW, you'll see it says 0 and then it goes to plus whatever. Different DAWs have different scales, but you want to have it in that range where if it's like green, yellow, and red, you want to have it so that your peaks are sort of touching yellow, but not even getting close to red, because that sounds distorted and that sounds clipped, and you might be testing with a song, but because you're nervous, you start singing kind of quietly, and then when the show starts, you start playing a bit harder because you get excited, and then the whole sound, the whole mix you have becomes over compressed and a bit clipped and not sounding great. So yeah, so that's if you wanted to use more connections. Obviously, if you're using something like Zoom or even Facebook, this still doesn't work quite well, because these programs only see the first two inputs, which in this case, in the case of the Focusrite, for example, it might mean that you're also not able to use the effects, you're not able to use reverb yet, because if you select Focusrite as your microphone source in Zoom or Facebook, you're not getting any of the effects. We want to be able to route the audio from the interface into the DAW, our program, our audio editor, and then from there to our stream. I'll go into more detail about that in a second as well. Yes, so the next part, right? The next part is that I wanted to talk about is just the video quality itself. So if you're using a phone, as I was saying, lights are very important. Also, depending on what phone you have, you might have to download different things. I'm not going to cover specifics because it would take me 10 hours to go over every single configuration, whether you're in Mac or Windows, or if you're in Mac, do you have Mojave, do you have Catalina, are you running El Capitan? If you're in Windows, are you in Windows 10, are you in Windows 7? It all changes, which is why I've been busy with this Stream Tune-Up service, is because it allows me to, sure, you can do as many tutorials and YouTube videos as you want, but this allows me to get in your computer, to hear what you're trying to do, how you want to sound, and then for me to work with you to make sure that everything is the way you want it to be. Now, the cool thing about that is that as an artist, we're used to having people to do this, right? And it's a bit frustrating to all of a sudden be playing from your house, and you know, you have your instruments, and all of a sudden you have to become an IT person or a videographer and a sound tech too, and it's just a lot of hats to wear. So my business has become help you with that, so that you can only worry about the sound part, or sorry, not the sound part, but the actual show part. So using your phone allows you to have better quality. Other things you can do are, for example, buy a webcam. Online, there's a variety of options. The one I have, for example, is a Logitech HD 1080, and it's not the one you're looking at right now. Because let's say that 1.0 is, you know, or version 1.0, the simplest way you can stream is from your phone with a built-in microphone. Number 2 would be from your computer with a USB microphone and the built-in camera, right? 2.5, let's say, let's make it into 3 tiers. 2.5 would be using your computer, using a USB microphone, but then using a webcam, which is not this. Webcam doesn't look as good as this. It looks better than the built-in camera, but what I'm using right now is actually a DSLR. DSLR is a camera. It's a professional digital camera. I forget what the SLR stands for, but I'm sure someone in the comments will write it. But basically, it allows you to change lenses. Obviously, the sensors and everything in the camera is going to be better than a phone. It's going to be better than a webcam. It's going to be better than a built-in microphone because it's made to take pictures and take high-quality video. The one I have is a Sony A6500. And then I ended up getting a 35 millimeter lens. I think it's f1.2 or 1.8 or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm also just learning about lenses and all the analogies that you can make with microphones and lenses. But I love how this camera looks. However, something that happens is that you can't really connect the camera to your computer because the USB port on these cameras is only to transfer contents from the memory card, right? If I had recorded a video or pictures or whatever, and then transfer them to the computer. However, most of these cameras, check the manuals. Again, specifics are going to change per person. But most of them have an HDMI output. Usually it's a mini or micro HDMI output. And what I do is basically, take a cable from the HDMI out port of the camera and then connect that to your computer. Some of you might be thinking at this point, well, my computer has an HDMI port. My MacBook Pro or whatever has an HDMI port. Can I connect that camera into it? The answer is no, because the port on the computer, the HDMI port, is actually an output port. HDMI, at least from the computer perspective, I'm not sure in others, so correct me if I'm wrong, but HDMI is unidirectional, meaning that you can only send a signal from point A to point B, but it can't go back the other way around. So the HDMI port in your computer only works to send signal out of your computer into somewhere else. That somewhere else could be an external monitor or a TV or whatever. The HDMI port on the camera is also an output port. So we need to somehow create an input port in our computer to connect our fancy camera. What I use is something called, it's from Elgato is the name of the brand, and the product is called Cam Link. What it is like the interface that I was talking about when it came to sound, right? It converts from analog to digital. In this case, what it does is convert the signal from the HDMI port so that now it can be read by the computer through USB. So it's a capture card. This became really famous a few years ago when gamers started using them to connect the output of their TV, for example, or their Nintendo or PlayStation. and connect that into their computer so that they could stream the video games that they were playing on their TVs. I was lucky that I got mine maybe 2 or 2.5 years ago, because I've been doing live stream shows from my studio since then. They're pretty hard to find now because they're sold out pretty much everywhere. But there are other options for capture cards. Elgato CamLink is one that works really well, but if you're able to find other capture cards, that's what they're called, a capture adapter. Basically, it's an HDMI to USB port. Make sure it's not a USB to HDMI, because that's to connect an external monitor to your computer. You have to, and those are a lot cheaper. You can find those for like, I don't know, $20, $30. Capture cards, so again, where you can connect the HDMI and connect it through USB to your computer, you're probably going to find them for over $100, I would say. And they're small. It looks like a USB key, but it's how you're going to be able to connect the HDMI of your camera into your computer. And that's what you're seeing now. It's the signal coming from my camera into the capture card into my computer. This presents another problem, which is obviously that I need a USB port for that. And most likely I might be using my Focusrite for it already, or a webcam, or whatever else I need. Computers lately have been reducing the amount of ports, just for, I don't know why, but they've been reducing the amount of ports. So I recommend you get a hub. It's basically something that you connect to the computer through USB, let's say, or Thunderbolt, or whatever kind of connection you have in your computer. And it splits the signal into 3 USBs and a SD card reader and an HDMI out, or whichever. Like, there's millions of options. Just make sure that you get one that you can connect to power, right? This is a powered one. Some of them you're able to connect directly to the computer. The problem with that is that if you're using the Focusrite and you're also using the capture card, the port in the computer, the USB port, doesn't have enough power to properly make all these devices work. So by getting a hub that is powered, Wafflink is a brand that makes a few that are that way. They're a bit more expensive, but the advantage of that is that the power that is being given to each of the USB ports in that hub is coming directly from the wall, instead of your computer having to provide that power via the USB port or the USB bus, even if that's redundant. Now, the difference between DSLRs, especially with good lenses, and even webcams, which are a big step up from built-in cameras in computers, right? You have built-in cameras in computers, then you have webcams, and then you have DSLRs. Right now, I'm going from a Mac Mini, so there's no built-in camera, but I do have a webcam that, again, is better than the ones in laptops. And let me just switch this so that you can see how this image, again, Sony 6500 with a nice lens, would look like if I were using my webcam, for example. The webcam's great. It has good quality, and the colors are not bad. But then you can see my whole basement, right? Like, this is not necessarily what I wanted to have in the shot. So if I go back to this camera, then you can see there's a huge difference between that and this, right? With this, I can get a bit more cinematic. It has a very shallow depth of field. I think I'm saying the terms properly, which basically means that the sweet spot, if you know what that means in audio, like the spot where it sounds best, is very narrow, right? Like, you see my hand here is sort of in focus. If I just put it out a little bit, it's going to become blurred, right? So everything that's closer to the camera is blurred. As soon as it gets closer to my face, you're going to see it really defined, right? And then as I start going out, then things will start blurring. And then by the time you get to the background, all that stuff is just completely out of the picture. Oh yeah, this is the Aston microphone I was talking about. I also have some drums set up in the background. And the way that I do it, which is, again, using the DAW, and this is what I'll be explaining in a second, will show you sort of how we can route the audio of our interfaces to the streaming program we're using. In my case, I'm using OBS, and from OBS, I'm streaming to Facebook and YouTube. You can do it directly to Facebook as well, or you can do it directly to YouTube. And I'm happy to help you with all those things. Go to streamtuneup.com, send me an email through there, and we can set up a consultation for you. So the other thing I wanted to show you, right, this is the DAW part. This microphone sounds great, and if you connect it directly to the computer and make that be your source, your microphone source in your stream, it's going to sound fine. But the advantage of running it through your DAW is actually going to be the fact, this is Pro Tools, it's kind of the same in GarageBand or... Yeah, GarageBand is free. Right, you can use GarageBand if you're a Mac. It's free, and it works as well. Right, sorry, I'm clicking in the wrong screen. The advantage of this is that I have my vocal here, right? I created a track, and in that track, I made sure that the input on it was input 1, right? This might look completely different in your case if you're using Logic, or if you have a different interface that doesn't have this many inputs, it might just show as microphone 1 or microphone 2, right? I have to arm it, because if I don't arm it, if I arm it again, then you're able to hear me, right? It's passing audio from the DAW back to my ears and into the stream. The reason I did it this way, however, is because then I could, for example, send some reverb, right? So I have my reverb channel here. I'm not going to get into specifics, but this is my vocal. I created a send. That send goes to an aux. That aux is this aux here. In Logic, it's going to be different, but same concept. And then on that aux track, I loaded just any reverb for now. And as soon as I mute it, you'll be able to hear me with reverb. So while I'm singing between songs, while I'm playing in the middle of the song, then I can have this reverb going. It makes it sound a bit nicer. And then in between songs, all I would have to do is just mute it. And then I'm ready to start another song. And then I'm talking in between songs and doing my banter and all that stuff. So it gives you a bit more control, as you can see. Another thing I like to do a lot is to make sure to cut some low frequencies. You'll find that a lot of these microphones get really sensitive with rumble and trucks going by, and then maybe your furnace is on, and there's a lot of your fridge, for example, a lot of noises that normally you don't notice, but as soon as you put a microphone in the space, and all these noises get amplified, basically. So what I do here with the EQ is sort of cut some low frequencies I'm not going to need. I can, obviously, if I start overdoing it, you'll notice that my voice just becomes super, super, super thin. But then if I do this, then I get some of that low frequency back. So it's a matter of finding the sweet spot. Also, if you're kind of scared by this, this is low frequencies, and that is high frequencies. And you can just control those two for now. Obviously, I'm happy to explain a bit more about EQs and how to get good sound later on. But for now, I would say, yeah, use the low cut or high pass filter to cut lows or to pass highs. And then use a high shelving like this. You know, it's kind of a broad from here on amplify, right? Or from here on subtract, right? Is what you want to do. And in this case, I would say, if you're finding your voice is too harsh, right? If I start doing this, you'll notice that all those S's and everything gets a bit annoying. If your microphone sounds like that, then just bring this down a little bit, and if I make it like this, then it's too dark, and you might have to find a sweet spot for that as well. You can do other things like
for example, this, right? I have another effect here, and I can change it
to whatever I want.
But that's silly, so I'm just going to cut it. Obviously, now if I were to create a click track, for example, and I hit record, then you're going to hear that too. So the output of my DAW is connected to the stream as well. Or for example, I can have something like a keyboard of sorts, right? And then my my USB keyboard is connected here. Right, and I can be playing and singing, and I could also have a guitar connected into another input. And as long as I'm creating new tracks in my DAW and selecting the right input for them, then I'm going to be able to send the stereo output, so whatever you're hearing on your headphones, to your streaming software. How you do that in Mac, because it's going to be different in every system, is by using a program called Loopback. And let's just go here and select Loopback. Oops. Okay, so this is Loopback. I'll put it here. It's basically a virtual interface. So what that is a Y cable. Right now, your Pro Tools or your Logic or whatever, it goes directly to your headphones because that's what you have selected as your playback engine, right? Under playback engine, let me move the window here. You can see that my playback engine is my Universal Audio Thunderbolt, which is the interface I'm using. If you were using a USB microphone, it would show as USB Uno or Yeti Blue or Focusrite 2i2 or whatever it is. That's where you would select it. Again, it's different on every program, but it's usually under Preferences Audio is where you're going to find what playback engine or what interface you're using for your program. Buffer size, without getting too technical, for this kind of thing, you want to have it at 128 or lower if your computer allows you to it. Anything higher than this is great for the computer because it allows it to think a bit more before it sends the audio back, so the audio on itself is more stable. But you're going to hear latency, which means that what you hear on your headphones is going to be coming a bit later than when you actually set it. So it can be really distracting if you're playing something percussive or even singing. It's weird to hear your voice coming from a different place. So going back to Loopback, let me make sure that you're seeing that. Yeah. So what I did here, Loopback is a program that I think it cost $100 American, which seems expensive, but at this point, it's one of the only programs that allows you to make interconnections between apps. That's basically what it's doing. Under sources, you'll be able to find every single audio device, but also every single app that you have open in your computer. Pro Tools was one of the options, and that's why I selected it here. And what that means is that it's sending the output of Pro Tools to an output channel that's called Loopback. We still don't know what that is yet, but we'll just say that, yeah, it's now basically being divided. A section goes to your ears, right? That's as if you were recording in your home with no streaming. And the other one, the other copy of this audio, which is Loopback, I right now have in my hand, right? That's what this is. You have the other end of the copy of the audio, basically. Now I want to connect that somewhere else. That somewhere else is going to be your microphone input in your streaming software. So if you're using OBS, Loopback audio would be your input. If you're using Zoom, then Loopback audio would also be your input. Let me show you. Let's see. Let's open Zoom. So we're going to open Zoom, and it's going to say allow. Okay, and then I'm going to go to settings from, preferences. No, I did not want to do that. But yeah, these open preferences or settings as well. From here under audio, you can see that the options are many of them, right? If I had selected Universal Audio Thunderbolt, which in your case would be Focusrite 2i2 or whatever microphone you have, you would have selected that as your microphone source. This is what is going to Zoom for people to hear. It's exactly the same in Facebook. It's exactly the same in YouTube. But the microphone is going to be, in this case, loopback. So that means that I'm grabbing the other end of that Y cable, of that copy of the audio, and now I'm connecting it into the microphone input of Zoom. That way, you're able to hear the output of your DAW, which again can have reverb, can have compression so that it sounds nicer. It can have some effect and whatever you want to use. I help a friend with a theater show, for example, where in Zoom, in Loopback, he had Pro Tools, or Cubase or whatever he was using, but he also had QLab, which is a program that allows you to trigger cues. So like the sound of thunder and rain and birds and all that stuff was happening through QLab. I, in this case, have Tidal too, for example. So if this is not off and that is on, and if I were to open Tidal right now, and where is Tidal? If I click here and I press play, you'll be able to hear that signal as well. Right, I'm just gonna leave it there for a second because I don't want to get any copyright infringements for playing background music that I don't own. But yeah, that's pretty much how I would be getting audio from my DAW to the stream. We talked about the lights, we talked about the webcams. Unfortunately, at this point, playing in sync, meaning like playing at the same time as other musicians in different parts of the world, with video and audio is not really that stable, and it has a lot of latency as well. So even though it sounds like I'm playing at the same time as the person on the other side of the stream, there's some latency that's very considerable. Sometimes it can be like many seconds. So it's really unusable. So lately what people have been doing as well is creating a video performance. So they're playing live, but to a click or a pre-recorded song, and then they add their part live. They record themselves playing live, and then someone stitches that together, all the audio and then all the video as well. So I wanted to show you a little thing I did with the people from Bravo Niagara. This is, for example, one of those projects where every person recorded in their own home with their camera. Some of them used webcams, some of them used fancy cameras, others used built-in cameras on their phones or computers. Same thing with the audio. Some of it is from a studio, some of it is from phones and with terrible quality. But then I was able to clean it up. Took a while, but I was able to clean up the audio and then put the video together as well. For video editing, I use a program called DaVinci Resolve, which I really recommend. For me at least, is way easier to use than Final Cut or Adobe Premiere. All these programs I found that were a bit slow in my system. DaVinci Resolve works really well, and it allowed me to create this video. It has almost 150 performers, and I had to cut each of those little squares and make sure that they were relatively in sync, and same thing with the audio. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it here. Anyway, you get the idea. That was a lot of fun to make, and it's a way for artists to sort of have the closest thing to live music they can have now. If not, you can also do it from your house with the different methods that we just described. And yeah, it's just a matter of making sure that whatever you're buying, make sure that you do it in sort of small steps. Again, don't feel frustrated if you can't get the fanciest camera with the fanciest cable and the lights and all these things there are ways to MacGyver it a little bit to be a bit more resourceful. And again, with lights, this is a basement, and it looks awful, but just by using proper lighting and a nice lens and the audio, which again, sure, I have a universal audio interface, which they sound amazing, and I'm using a microphone that's also really good. But with some time, you can get less fancy things sounding better than just connecting it directly to your stream, for sure. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I was gonna answer some questions, but I'm having to go to the hospital soon because I'm having a baby soon. But when I'm back, please email me to, visit streamtuneup.com. And that's the service I'm using, again, for having one-on-one consultations. There's a lot of information here, and everything I've said is already on YouTube, and there's millions of tutorials on how to do that. I went through that whole thing, and I know that it can be sometimes days of frustration, and maybe there's a video that explains how to do one thing, but then when you try to do it, it doesn't work the same way. That's where I come in. I'm also still working from here, recording drums, recording bass, recording guitar, producing, mixing, mastering. So yeah, for all that stuff, please visit pachasound.com, pacha.com. I'm going to include those links on the description too. And yeah, have a great stream, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you.